Welcome back to Nation of Glory. Today, we bring you a story carved from strength, built from struggle, and sealed in the legacy of a man whose name echoed through arenas, locker rooms, and the hearts of wrestling fans across the world. This is not just a story of a wrestler. It's a story of a warrior, a brother, a father, and a legend whose journey reminds us that power isn't only in the body, but in the heart. Today, we present the cinematic story of James Henry Neidhart, known to millions as Jim, the Anvil, Neidhart. Imagine a young boy growing up in California, full of fire, strength, and energy that refused to be contained. Jim wasn't just a kid who liked adventure. He lived inside it. He was big, strong, curious, and always hungry for challenges. Some boys dreamed of being heroes. Jim wanted to be one. Even before the world knew his name, the world around him already knew his potential. You could see it in his size, feel it in his confidence, and sense it in every step he took. Growing up, sports became the foundation of his world. Football was his first battlefield. On the field, Jim wasn't simply another player. He was a force. Fast for his size, powerful for his age, unstoppable in his drive. His teammates saw him as the anchor. His opponents feared him long before he even touched the ball. But football, for Jim, was more than a game. It was discipline, focus, and the beginning of understanding who he was. He pushed himself, trained harder, and built the body that one day would carry his legacy into arenas packed with roaring fans. But destiny does not always travel in straight lines. Life doesn't always let us stay in the place where we begin. And before long, Jim realized that while football shaped him, it wasn't the final story he was meant to tell. The fire inside him wanted more. Something bigger. Something louder. Something that allowed his soul to roar with the same intensity as his body moved. That's when the wrestling world began to whisper his name. Opportunity arrived in the form of a legendary name, Stu Hart. The Hart Dungeon, known in wrestling as a birthplace of warriors, became the place where Jim would turn from strongman into legend. This wasn't a simple training facility. It was a forge. A place where pain taught technique, where sweat built character, and where the weak were stripped away until only the strongest version of the wrestler remained. Jim walked in with power, but he walked out with purpose. Inside the dungeon, he met the Hart family, not just a family by blood, but a family by brotherhood. The connection that would change everything was with Bret Hart. Calm, technical, precise, and brilliant in the ring. Bret was the quiet storm. Jim was the thunder. Together, they would create a tag team that wrestling would never forget. But before the world cheered, Hart Foundation, before pink and black became symbols of excellence, Jim had to prove himself. And he did. Every single day. Enduring painful drills, brutal holds, endless repetitions, and the demanding mentorship of Stu Hart. Jim earned not just respect but admiration. He wasn't just physically strong. His will was unbreakable. When Jim married into the Hart family, the bond became even deeper. Bret wasn't just his partner. He was now his brother-in-law. And together, they were ready to take on the world. Then came the moment. The moment when the curtain lifted, the lights hit the ring, and the world first heard the roar of Jim, the Anvil, Neidhart. That nickname wasn't just for show. Jim was once challenged to throw an actual anvil for distance. And he did it, with the kind of power that made everyone watching freeze in disbelief. That feat became part of his identity. Strength became his signature. Power became his presence. When he stepped into the ring, the entire arena felt him, not just with their eyes, but with their bones. His laugh, his intensity, his wild personality became instantly recognizable. Jim wasn't a villain, nor was he simply a good guy. He was something else. Something raw, something loud, something unforgettable. Then came the team. The duo. The foundation. Bret, the Hitman, Hart and Jim, the Anvil, Neidhart. Together, they formed the Hart Foundation, one of the most iconic tag teams to ever step into a wrestling ring. Bret brought precision. Jim brought power. Bret brought technique. Jim brought chaos. The combination was electric. The chemistry was undeniable. They moved like two halves of the same force. If Bret was the mind, Jim was the muscle. If Bret built strategy, Jim executed destruction. Crowds didn't just watch them. They lived through them. Every slam, every punch, every victory. Champions were not born. They were earned. And the Hart Foundation earned everything they achieved. Two-time WWF Tag Team Champions. A duo that changed the landscape of tag team wrestling forever. Their matches became classics. Their synergy became legendary. Their presence, respected by fans and feared by opponents, solidified them as icons. But as much as success followed Jim in the ring, life outside the ring had its own battles waiting. The wrestling business is tough. The schedule is unforgiving. The body is pushed beyond limits. And the soul, no matter how strong, feels every hit. Jim's life had victories, but it also had struggles. Times when life felt heavy. Times when shadows followed the spotlight. Times when strength looked different. Not muscles, not power, but endurance of the heart. But through all of it, one thing remained unshakable. Jim Neidhart loved. He loved his family. He loved his daughters. And he loved the business that gave him his identity. His laugh, his energy, his presence, those things never faded. Even in his toughest moments, he found reasons to keep going. One of his greatest legacies is the next generation. His daughter, Natalia, carried the Hart passion into the ring. And Jim, every time he watched her perform, felt a pride that could move mountains. She wasn't just continuing the family legacy. She was honoring the spirit of her father. And Jim loved her with a force that matched the strength he once displayed in the ring. But life, as always, has its final bell. In 2018, the wrestling world lost the Anvil. A moment that broke hearts across continents. Fans cried. Wrestlers mourned. Families grieved. Bret Hart called him a brother forever. Natalia called him her inspiration. The world called him a legend. But legends do not end. They transform. Because Jim Neidhart is not gone. Not really. He lives in every memory of roaring crowds. In every replay of the Hart Foundation's triumphs. In every story shared by wrestlers who loved him. In every heart that carries the pink and black legacy. And most of all, in the lives of the family who still feel his love. When you look at Jim's life, you don't just see success. You see resilience. You see a man who wasn't afraid to be larger than life. You see an athlete who pushed past limits. You see laughter that filled locker rooms. You see a father whose heart was stronger than any muscle he flexed in the ring. Jim's story reminds us that greatness isn't about perfection. It's about passion. It's about dedication. It's about standing tall even when life pushes you down. It's about giving everything you have to the world, and leaving behind a legacy that inspires others to rise. He may have been known as the Anvil, but to many, he was a hammer, shaping others, building futures, forging strength, and leaving marks on hearts that will last forever. And for fans who watched him during the golden era of wrestling, Jim wasn't just a performer. He was a symbol of power, of charisma, of brotherhood, of family, and of a time when wrestling felt larger than life. So today, as we close this journey, we remember him. Not with sadness, but with gratitude. Gratitude for the memories he gave. Gratitude for the passion he carried. Gratitude for the legacy he built that will live forever. Thank you, Jim, the Anvil, Neidhart. For the strength. For the laughter. For the battles. For the roar. Your story lives on in every arena, every heart, and every moment of wrestling history. And thank you, Nation of Glory family, for joining us in this emotional tribute. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the legends we grew up with, and if you want more journeys like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share this video with others who appreciate greatness. Your support helps us keep stories like these alive. Until next time, stay inspired, stay strong, and keep chasing your glory.